When it comes to best ball, nobody does it as uniquely as drafters do. I'm Tom Strachen, this is Andrew Erickson joining me. Tonight we'll be catching you up on everything that matters from training camp, telling you all about rises and fallers, all the storylines you need to pay attention to. And we'll also be telling you how you could win $500,000 playing best ball on drafters. Andrew, busy season, busy weekends for both of us, but are you back in the zone for another week of big action as we count down to the first proper NFL preseason slate?
Yeah, no, I'm super excited. The NFL season is quickly approaching. Every single day, we're getting closer and closer. We're gonna have those preseason games, like you said. And we were talking about this before we started going on here, and I feel like I'm almost more of a detective now, where I have to read between these training camp reports because of last year with Kyron Williams and Puka Nacua. Those guys were such big hits that if you already liked them to an extent, I know that Debro and Joe really liked Puka Nacua. So the fact that he was also getting the additional drum beat along with their pre-draft analysis, or well, that's how you hit the home run. So again, I was joking, well, who's getting first team reps this week? And that's the guy whose ADP is going to rise naturally. So super fun time of year. Drafts are starting to kick off. I was just at Flex Draft in New York City, so that was a ton of fun drafting the team. Got Jalen Waddle, so I felt really good about that. But yeah, man, let's break it down.
Yeah, so last week we reviewed the rises and fallers in best ball ADP. Next week we'll be back doing the same. But before we get into the best ball draft on drafters tonight, let's just quickly touch on the biggest rise and falls over the last 7 days. It's been Justin Fields with Russell Wilson still out, Sam Howell with Geno Smith missing a couple of practices, Justice Hill after John Harbaugh said that he'd have a big role in this offense, Jordan Mason, who apparently could be the RB2 in San Francisco, Dylan Laub, who's been impressing with the Raiders, Will Shipley, who's been getting lots of reps with the Eagles, Chase Brown, who the team seem to love and want him to have a real opportunity to be the RB1 in Cincinnati, Johnny Wilson, Andrei Yoshevich, Theo Johnson, who the Giants particularly seem high on, that he might be ahead of Daniel Bellinger already, and then Greg Dulcich, who's been lighting it up every day through camp, according to lots of Broncos beat reporters. Andrew, which one of those names is the most important riser out of this list to you?
I think for me, it's still Chase Brown. It's Chase Brown season. We've been here. We've been having fun. Right after we got the report that this was from his offensive lineman basically saying, I would draft this guy in fantasy football now. No one has checked this particular offensive lineman's fantasy football record. So we cannot confirm nor deny if he is a sharp player and whether we should be taking his advice. But we are going to take it anyway. We're going to run with it, especially when it confirms our priors. Again, I was on Chase Brown early on. I thought that he offered more explosiveness, but a thing that I've pointed out on X or when I've been interacting with people saying, oh, good job. Like you were right to fade Zach Moss. Like, hey, like we're not there yet. Like all we've gotten right now is some closing line value, but that doesn't necessarily guarantee us anything. There's plenty of closing line value that amounts to absolutely nothing. And the thing that we really need to keep our eyes peeled when it comes to Chase Brown is the pass protection stuff. That's the stuff that I'm still waiting to hear from training camp, from the beat reporters. Maybe we'll see it a little bit in the preseason if we see Chase Brown out there. Are they trusting him on third downs? Or is it every third down? Oh, it's Zach Moss is in because he's in pass pro. So that's the big red flag. And that's really what's going to hold Chase Brown back from a second year breakup. Because besides that, checks us all the boxes because we know we can catch passes out of the backfield. We know he's explosive with the ball in his hands. And that's what like the last piece really is what we're looking for with Chase Brown. Okay, did he improve in pass protection in year two? And again, this is what a lot of running backs do in year two. They do improve in pass pro or whatever they were bad at as rookies. So I'm optimistic that Chase Brown can continue to still grow and get better in that pass protection. So I'm just waiting with bated breath to get that report saying, oh, Chase Brown pass pro looks excellent.
Well, Orlando Brown, I don't know about his fantasy football record, but I do know, thanks to Ben Baby, one of the Bengals beat reporters on Twitter, but during his pre-draft interview with the Bengals, he was asked what the capital of Spain was, and he answered Portugal. So weigh that into your determination about Chase Brown as much as you want. Out of the rest of the risers, the one I want to mention just quickly, it is Greg Dulcich. Like, maybe I've been red-pilled by Greg Dulcich too many times. Like, I drafted plenty of him last offseason. I thought that he had a real chance to build on a promising rookie season where, yes, he missed a decent chunk of time, but when he was on the field, he was quite electric. We saw him being used downfield. We saw him used near the line of scrimmage. It's like plenty of a recipe that we want from our fantasy football tight ends. And then last year was quite a letdown. But if he's tearing it up every day at camp, we know that outside Cortland Sutton, there's an awful lot of question marks on this Broncos pass catching group. So I really like the idea that Greg Dulcich could potentially deliver with something. Moving across to the Fallers, only 3 real notable names. Drake May, after the Patriots seem set on starting Jacoby Brissett for a little bit of time. DeAndre Hopkins, after dealing with, I think it was a knee issue. And then Jermaine Burton, who, with some of the Bengals' deeper wide receivers making good inlays like Andre Yoshevich, as well as T. Higgins signing his 1-year franchise deal, it just seems like somebody had to start falling. Which of those names do you want to touch on before we get into this draft, Andrew?
I think the Hopkins one probably makes sense to hit on from a best ball and also redraft perspective, because you're dealing with a older wide receiver who's now going to miss the rest of training camp. He's going to miss 4 to 6 weeks was the initial diagnosis. And the thing with DeAndre Hopkins you have to keep in mind is this guy doesn't practice ever. This is a
Yeah.
total gamer that he's not getting practice reps during the week. Basically, all he does all week is prepare his body to play in the NFL game that's coming up because he's an older player. So I think this matters a lot. And especially in a redraft perspective, if you're not comfortable with drafting a guy who's going to be on the injury report every single week, which is going to be the case with DeAndre Hopkins, even if it's rest, quote unquote, that he's missing practice for, I think that those are valuable repetitions he's missing with Will Levis. Even though he played with Levis last year, it's still a new offense. Calvin Ridley now has a chance to really kind of separate himself. I know that we viewed Ridley and Hopkins so closely kind of during up to this point, but now it seems pretty obvious that Ridley's going to at least get a head start in trying to open the season as the most productive Titans receiver. So their schedule's also brutal to start the year. So Hopkins, for me, I'm more than happy to let someone else click him because he's going to be a bench guy anyway. So what am I winning if I really hit on DeAndre Hopkins as an older player dealing with a knee injury that could be lingering throughout the season? So for those reasons, like I've definitely lowered him a lot in my rankings. There's a bunch of other upside receivers I'd rather take shots on when it comes to DeAndre Hopkins. And the other guy too I want to mention, so Jermaine Burton obviously falling due to the Yoshevich hype. The thing that's interesting about Yoshevich is that he has benefited the most from Jamar Chase not being at practice. And it was something that kind of stuck out to me when I was looking at the Bengals depth chart, the unofficial depth chart. It also says Zach Moss is RB1. So take it with a grain of salt. But it has Yoshevich behind Jamar Chase on the depth chart. So you could spin this one way where the reason he looks so good in training camp is because he's in the Jamar Chase role. Like that's what he's practicing because there's no Chase, and that's why Burrow is feeding him because Burrow is going to feed Chase when the season all starts. So as someone that likes Chase as the number one receiver, I love it. I love thinking about it this way, but it's just something I'm going to keep in mind as we, again, you never want to get too carried away with some of these training camp reports. And remember, we do have analysis on these players from their rookie years, but at least Yoshevich did look good in his limited time as a rookie.
Yeah, and of course, stay tuned to FantasyPros.com where we'll keep you up to date on all of that stuff. But tonight, we're here to draft the best ball team on Drafters, and there's so many nuances to the Drafters platform. It is total points only, no playoffs, none of the randomness of best ball pods. If you've built super teams on other platforms where you have the tournament setting and then been annihilated when you get to week 15, 16, 17, this is the platform for you. It's basically draft in a 12-team league, and then the contest runs from weeks 1 to 17, and it is just the team who scores the very best. I mean, like, there is so much bragging rights when it comes to drafters because you are, without doubt, the team who has scored the most points and is the best team within the contest. It's $15 entry. We're playing tonight at a point where there's 53,000 teams currently in here. We have 186,000 total entrants. For the last 2 years, these contests on Drafters, they haven't filled, which makes it very plus EV to enter. The prize pool is guaranteed with a total prize pool of $2.5 million, 500,000 at first place. So the fewer people that enter, the better your chances are of winning it. If you use code FantasyPros for a 100% deposit match up to $100 when you sign up, that's over 6 free entries. Deposit using the code FantasyPros. Use the link in the description to redeem this offer and join the contest today. Like I said, weeks 1 to 17, it is just total points all the way. Best ball scoring, so every week your highest scoring players will hit your lineup. No playoffs. You've got 1 quarterback, 2 running backs, 3 wide receivers, tight end, and a flex, full PPR. No bonuses, just regular scoring. We'll be in a 12-team fast draft, 20 rounds. There are slow draft options available as well. And I mean, there's a lot to love about this format. The top 28,000 players are all going to get paid here. And at the minute, like I said, there's only 53,000. So we've already got a fairly good shot at returning some level of money in this draft. Andrew, how much do you enjoy this twist on best ball?
It's weird because shouldn't this be kind of the way it should have been in the first place? Now, when you talk about best ball, and I think before it really became this own thing, its own hive mind, I always kind of assumed that, yeah, the team that scores the most points should win it all, right? It should be cumulative scoring. But as we started looking deeper into the prize structure of some of these other sites, oh, no, it really is based on those weeks 14, 15, 16, 17, which mimics more of an actual fantasy draft, a redraft team where, yeah, you can have the number one seed and then you get knocked out. So I think that this really strikes a great balance where, no, gone are the days of getting the number one seed and then getting bounced in the playoffs. You're the number one seed. You're in the driver's seat to take it home all the way and really win. So I think it added another layer of strategy because just total games played that matters so much. And yes, you care about the weekly ceiling of a player because that's ultimately how you're scoring on a week to week basis. That doesn't disappear. But having guys available to you at the end of the season versus, okay, I had a Jonathan Brooks player that really turned it down for me down the stretch. Well, maybe that player is not nearly as valuable because you're taking so many zeros from him early on. And just an example of some of these other injured players where their second half surges may not be as strong as they would be in the other format.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's definitely some nuance to how you want to approach this, which we can get into as we go. Just waiting on this draft to fill up here. Um, so for you, do the rookies take a knock in this format? We don't want to take many zeros. We want to be getting as many points as possible every week. So we stay in touch with the teams at the top of the list. Does that make you more wary of taking some of these rookies who might not have the biggest role from the start?
I don't think so. I think that it's more of the roster construction strategy where you're really trying to balance out, hey, I have a bunch of players I feel really good can score for me in the beginning of the season because we do know rookies, yes, a lot of their production is in the second half, but it could be a lot of production that they get in the second half of the season. So you still want that part of it, especially because it's usually baked into their ADP, right? Everyone knows that, hey, this is cumulative scoring. So you don't necessarily need to draft these rookies nearly as aggressively, but to balance it out with other players that maybe will be more front loaded production. Again, it is a little bit easier to project what guys can do for the first month of the season before injuries and chaos like strike all the teams. In the second half of the season, where it becomes a little bit harder to figure out, okay, especially now that we're drafting in August, okay, which guys are going to be these heavy hitters in the second half. And most of the time, just from historical trends, it is young players, it is rookie players that maybe don't have a role week one, but have a bigger role because they are ascending players into talents or because, like I said, injuries are going to hit every single team.
So the draft just filled, and we're going to be picking at the 3 spot. Andrew, we've drafted a bunch of teams on the turns, not quite as close to the turn at the minute, but the 3 spot still. We could go a bunch of different ways with this once this one starts. How are you feeling about the top end of the draft at the minute?
I think, well, the content gods, shout out to them again, coming in the clutch, giving us a pick on the turn or right near the top of the draft. So love that. For me, it's status quo. It's still Jamar Chase, especially my wide receiver one. That's kind of who I'd be eyeing here, especially at the three. This is pretty close to where his ADP is, right around 4 on drafters. So I don't think it changes my strategy too much, being it's cumulative scoring. I think that Chase can be the highest scoring wide receiver in a full PPR. That means a lot. So that's who I would pick, Chase. I'm not sure if you have any other thoughts.
I'm good with Chase. Like, he's a player that I just never feel bad about my teams when I like Chase. You know, we're seeing Joe Burrow slide down draft boards at times.
Mm.
There seems to be this real feeling towards Joe Burrow that he just doesn't have the ceiling that we've seen him put up. And like for me, when drafts opened, I would have been willing to place Joe Burrow ahead of CJ Stroud, but it seems like this year the pocket passer that everybody's fallen in love with, and for plenty of good reasons, is CJ Stroud. And for the time being, I'm taking CJ Stroud when he falls, but like Joe Burrow is such an auto click whenever I take Chase. It's easy to stack Chase with T. Higgins, and that's what I'm looking for in best ball.
100%. In a cumulative scoring format, if we have Joe Burrow consistently tossing for 300 plus yards, lot of his players, a lot of his teammates are cheap. Chase is the most expensive part, but we were talking early on how Yoshevich could be a big part of this offense. Burton is starting to fall in ADP. You have the tight end room. Mike Gesicki's now dealing with an injury. Does that mean another tight end steps up? Or does it just mean, oh, yeah, we have all these guys, and then we have Chase, and that's the guy who was going to be the engine to our offense. So the debates can rave on and continue to go on about Zach Moss versus Chase Brown. Who's going to be the goal line back? Well, maybe it's just Jamar Chase.
Ahead of CD Lamb?
Yes. Lock it in.
Now, Andrew, last time we drafted together, some people in the comments said that you got your way too much with the player selection, so I'm going to push back tonight at times.
All right.
But one player, one player we need to talk about, who I'm particularly keen to see how they land in ADP tonight, is Puka Nacua. The news came out today that I think it was Adam Schefter who reported that Puka Nacua is viewed as week to week, which isn't what you want to hear when we're a matter of only a few weeks away from the start of the season. Have you adjusted him in your rankings yet?
Not quite yet. I think I kind of want to see what the market does with him first a little bit before I jump to conclusions. Now, how low is too low for Puka Nacua? Does this mean we're getting third round Puka Nacua? I don't think so. I think this is probably more firm second round because I think that he had fallen outside the first round in plenty of drafts that I've been, especially in redraft format. So I think that the end of round 2 is probably going to be his floor for the most part, but I don't know. Some people become very injury scarce and they get away from these injured players and they just don't want anything to do with them. I guess my other thing I'm thinking about is now how high does Cooper Kupp go? Because he was
Yeah,
already on a consistent trajectory of upward because he's in the best shape of his life. Because it's so funny, right? The best when the report comes that the Cooper Kupp is all the way back. This guy is so healthy, never had an injury in his entire NFL career, and then Puka gets hurt the same day, essentially, or within the same 24-hour period. So now, do we see Cooper Kupp go ahead of Puka? That would be my next question, and that would not surprise me.
yeah. So what I wondered was whether, and we didn't see him this draft, and I'll recap the first round in a moment, but is whether we get to a point where Puka Nacua falls to, say, pick 22 and pick 23, 24 maybe, but Cooper Kupp gets really pushed up to that turn and you start seeing people double stack them, because till now it had reached a point where that was a little more tricky to do with the ADP as it was. So I'll be double stacking them at any opportunity I can get. I'm not going to go too kind of like, if my exposures get above 15% on either player, I'd probably ease off then, but I'm quite happy up to that level. The first round played out. Christian McCaffrey at the 101, Tyreek Hill. We took Jamar Chase at 103. CeeDee Lamb fell to 104. Bijan Robinson, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Justin Jefferson, Brees Hall, AJ Brown, Drake London, and then Puka Nacua went at 111. Nico Collins on the turn. Then Marvin Harrison, Garrett Wilson, Deebo Samuel, Jahmyr Gibbs to start off the second round. I think people are going to be starting to take Deebo Samuel around that 1-2 turn even more now as these Brandon Ayuk to the Steelers rumors, they just keep picking up a bit of steam. I got with a fake picture of Brandon Ayuk saying goodbye to San Francisco today. Learn my lesson. Good reminder as always to make sure you're paying attention.
Yeah, you see them in those new jerseys saying goodbye. It looks so authentic, and yeah, you get got, and you're like, but I mean, Tom, you're not the only one. It's happened to everybody, and it's happened to everybody. And then there's people that lie about it. Essentially, is the way I look at it. So,
Yeah. So we're one pick away. Saquon Barkley's gone. We're looking at Chris Olave, Malik Neighbors, our guy Devonta Smith, Mike Evans, Brandon Ayuk. In terms of the running backs who are there, a decent chunk have gone, but Devon Achan, Kyron Williams are both there before it gets further down the list. Let me just make sure I've got ADP set and Derrick Henry. What do you like here, Andrew? Running back or a wide receiver?
I like wide receiver again. I think that we can push running back a little bit here. Waddle's my guy, but I know his ADP is a little bit lower. I don't know if he'll be there back when we pick again at 3. So Waddle will be my pick, but I'm not going to dissuade against any other receivers. I like them. They're all in a pretty similar range.
Yeah, I'm happy to take Jalen Waddle. I think that, we've talked about this on all the draft streams that we've done over the last month or so. Jalen Waddle's upside is massive, and the biggest thing that held him back last year was being unhealthy, and I don't think that we're going to see quite as many running touchdowns from the Dolphins again this year. And if Tua can learn to play in slightly cold weather or occasionally even just good against some good teams, then Waddle can have a massive season. And we've seen it from Waddle. We know this isn't projection. This is a player we've seen be excellent. So yeah, I'm down with that. When it comes back around to us, Brandon Ayuk, Mike Evans, DK Metcalf, Devonta Smith, Kyron Williams, DJ Moore. Any interest in Kyron Williams, or are you kind of more on the Blake Corum train now?
I'm more on the Blake Corum train personally, so I'm not. I think that we can push running back still. There's, do we want to take a falling Brandon Ayuk? I mean, I don't think that we're getting like a ton of value, especially if he goes to Pittsburgh. I think that this could be potentially a big mistake taking him here. So I'm cool with letting him slide, just because I don't think the other receivers are just. I don't think they're horrible alternatives.
Yeah, I think I'd push for Devonta Smith. I know we're both quite high on the Eagles. Are you happy with Smith?
Cool with me.
I think just Brandon Ayuk, we've talked, and there's been loads of coverage on Fantasy Pros this year. Particularly, Pat Fitzmaurice has been all over the fact that Brandon Ayuk was efficient to an insane level last year, and it really, what he needs is a really good situation. If he ends up with Arthur Smith and a yo-yoing quarterback situation, I'm not sure that's what we're hoping for. So I'm quite happy to take Devonta Smith, bet on the Eagles being a bounce back offense, bet on Kellen Moore being able to unlock Devonta Smith to another level. And through 3 rounds, having Jamar Chase, Jalen Waddle, and Devonta Smith, it feels pretty good because it's a total points format rather than a 14-week season where we're just trying to have the most points by the end of those 14 weeks and really hit the nuclear button at the very end. Do you feel more worried about doing a 0 RB build in this because you don't want to take zeros at the running back, or do you feel like there's enough value in the running back position still this year that we can have a good couple of running backs by the time we get to round 10?
I think we can, because we're still going to see discounted guys who people are afraid of what the workload's going to look like. So those guys don't go nearly as high. You still have the ability to kind of hodgepodge your way, put together running backs that, hey, this guy's going to be productive in the first half of the season. This guy's going to be productive in the second half of the season. All right, now let's combine them together. Let's view them as like one running back in my build, in my roster, because we have so many roster spots where we can make that type of happen. So look, I like the 3 receiver start. Again, it's full PPR. I feel like we got a lot of really great, solid, upside wide receivers. They're all also really good real life wide receivers. I'm not concerned about, Chase's role, Waddle's role. The thing with Smith, they've been talking him up as in the slot. They're moving him into the slot, into that CD Lamb role. That could be awesome for Devontae Smith. And I know that he's kind of been 1A, 1B with AJ Brown. Would it surprise me at all, or would it shock me if Devontae Smith outscores AJ Brown? Yes. But is it in the range of outcomes where he does see more slot usage? He's definitely good enough. Like, that's the thing with
Yep.
Smith. He's an excellent wide receiver. He got paid. Jalen Waddle got paid. Jamar Chase is trying to get paid. So we've got receivers that are established studs. So I feel good starting 3 wide receivers.
Yep. Big fan of the drafters interface. For anyone who hasn't used it before, your drafts active at the top will show up on the left, so it's really easy to do multiple drafts at once. I did a lot of drafts in the $2 contest earlier last month. They were a lot of fun. Beneath your name, it'll always tell you how many drafts you've done in each competition. So I'm lacking behind when it comes to this $15 one. I will definitely be doing plenty over the next month. And there's loads of additional rewards you get on drafters for doing more. Draft 10 teams, you get 1 bonus ticket. Draft 25, you get another bonus ticket. Draft 50, you get 2 bonus tickets. Draft 100, get 3 more bonus tickets. Max enter 150 drafts and you get a $100 bonus fund and a drafter's t-shirt. So lots of incentives to be drafting over here, particularly with there still being huge amount of spaces in this competition. So since our last pick, Brandon Ayuk did go 1 pick after us, then DK Metcalf, Mike Evans, DJ Moore, Stephon Diggs, Michael Pittman, Sam Laporta as the tight end 1, Zay Flowers, Isaiah Pacheco, Travis Etienne on the turn, Dalton Kincaid as the tight end 2, Christian Kirk, Amari Cooper, Tank Dell, Travis Kelce, T. Higgins, Josh Allen. And so we are 1 pick away. Jalen Hurts is at the top of ADP, which would give us that stack. Patrick Mahomes after him, George Pickens, who could be another potential faller with this Brandon Ayuk rumor, Trey McBride, Terry McLaurin, Lamar, Mark Andrews, Rashi Rice. What stands out to you as Jalen Hurts goes one pick before us?
Okay, I like the tight ends. That's the approach. I'm cool with not taking one of the top tier quarterbacks right now because it's full PPR. So I feel like we can still get a lot of points from our skill position players. We don't need that elite quarterback. So either McBride or Andrews. I know we love Andrews. I don't know if you want to change it up with McBride, one of the tight ends.
Let's go Trey McBride, and I think because it's kind of easy to get Kyler depending on what the team who already has Marvin Harrison does, but we can keep an eye on that. Um, yeah, I think betting on Trey McBride is something that I want to do. He really just exploded from a moment that Zach Ertz was gone there. I like the Cardinals' offense in general. I think that Kyler is very undervalued this year. So yeah, I'm good with that. So we won't be looking at Lamar Jackson when it comes round the corner. At running back, it's Josh Jacobs, Joe Mixon, James Cook, Alvin Kamara. Guys that I'm not necessarily excited to draft too many of. I mean, fifth round Josh Jacobs. How does that feel to you, Andrew?
Josh Jacobs. I still don't know what to make of this Packers backfield. I feel like every single show I'm on, or to talk about it, I always get like acid reflux thinking about this Packers backfield. To quote Christopher Harris on his pod, he has acid reflux players. That's essentially how I feel about when it comes to this Packers backfield. So I actually like James Cook, but I know he went. But look, I get the upside with Josh Jacobs. Like he plays in a good offense and he could be their bell cow. So if you want to push the button, I'm cool with it on Josh Jacobs.
I think Josh Jacobs is probably the kind of player who does okay in this format. We're looking for guaranteed touches. We want a certain level of production that's just going to keep us ticking over every week so we don't fall out of touch with the teams at the top. And getting somebody like Josh Jacobs, who, yes, I know that LaFleur likes to use a two running back system. We've talked about that lots. But I do think that Josh Jacobs is still going to see an awful lot of work. They didn't need to give him the contract that they did. Yes, Green Bay doesn't tend to guarantee a lot of money into future years, but there's still a decent chunk of change that's heading Josh Jacobs' way, and I think that they do view him as somebody who can play in all the phases of the offense, play in the passing game. He can be a goal line back, and I don't think AJ Dillon's particularly good. And much as reports have been positive about Marshawn Lloyd, it's like, well, okay, how many times do we see these rookies who get fairly good camp buzz but then turn into nothing? I'm hoping that's not going to be the case because I've drafted plenty of Marshawn Lloyd. But occasionally, just taking that hedge against yourself and saying, okay, if things don't play out right, and being humble enough to say maybe I am wrong on Marshawn Lloyd, having a little bit of Josh Jacobs sprinkled in there kind of feels fine.
I think the bet is he's on a great offense. He's the first Packers player that gets drafted. We're all super excited about this Packers offense. Jordan Love is right up there in the MVP odds because everybody sees his path to becoming the MVP, but we're just not sure how this offense is going to, which players are going to pop. But we know the offense overall with Jordan Love, what he showed last year, especially in the second half. Okay, this offense can have fantasy goodness in it. So the thing with me that I keep going back to when it comes to the Jacobs bullish side of things is, yeah, I think ideally they want to do a committee. They want to have a tandem. But if AJ Dillon's still bad and Marshawn Lloyd plays like a rookie, then well, we have to give Josh Jacobs all the touches. Okay. Like that's the scenario we're playing here. And last year too, you mentioned Josh Jacobs as the goal line back. That was the one thing the Packers were so bad at last year. AJ Dillon was horrible. They never used Aaron Jones in that role. That's what Josh Jacobs maybe was brought in to do. Hey, you're going to be the goal line back. And so when I was looking at some leading the NFL in rushing touchdowns odds, some bets, Josh Jacobs is 20-1. And I was like, that sounds like a pretty good little sprinkle here on Josh Jacobs because I could see the path just based on how much regression this team is headed for when it comes to rushing touchdowns because they just did not ever score rushing touchdowns last year. So you're going to see that even out a little bit. So maybe you don't see Jordan Love throw as many passing touchdowns, and that's going to benefit Josh Jacobs.
Yeah, so since our last pick, Rashi Rice went off the board, continues to rise with no news about a possible suspension. Then George Pickens goes at pick 53 overall. Keenan Allen, Lamar Jackson, Terry McLaurin, Chris Godwin, Rashad White, Calvin Ridley, who is on the rise slightly with DeAndre Hopkins' injury, Alvin Kamara, George Kittle, Deontay Johnson, Jaden Reed, Joe Mixon, Christian Watson, Roma Dunze, Kyle Pitts, Keon Coleman. We are one pick away. At the top of ADP, we are looking at Anthony Richardson, Xavier Worthy, Evan Ingram, Kenneth Walker, Lad McConkey, David Montgomery, James Conner. I kind of like a few players in this range. I don't mind Xavier Worthy. I don't mind Kenneth Walker. He seems to be having a good camp. Don't mind David Montgomery or James Conner. How about you, Andrew?
I'm cool with Ken Walker. I think that he's a player that maybe he smashes his ADP into oblivion, but I feel pretty comfortable that where we draft him, we're gonna get the return from where we drafted him. And again, when you're playing this out for the whole season long, the fact that Charbonnet is there, that means Walker's probably more likely to last the remainder of the season and give us those explosive spike weeks that he can with his rushing upside. So I'm cool with Walker here.
Yeah, I like that. I mean, there's definitely some reports around now that the new Seahawks coaching staff view him as a 3-down back, putting him in for pass downs, which I don't think he's ever going to turn into Christian McCaffrey there, but we've seen enough that he can be kind of okay in that range. And you don't, not all running backs need to be Christian McCaffrey to be effective in that range. If you can catch the dump off passes and even turn in a few yards, we know that that catch is the valuable part of that for fantasy. So through 6 rounds, we have Josh Jacobs, Kenneth Walker, Jamar Chase, Jalen Waddle, Devonta Smith, and Trey McBride. The running backs, it's probably not a combination I end up double tapping running back in round 5 and 6 too often, but I do like that in this format where, it's cumulative points. We're looking for that kind of safe floor as much as anything. So far, those 2 running backs do have the same bye week, both on a week 10 bye, so something to be mindful of as we build out the rest of the room. But now it feels like we possibly want to get a wide receiver before the cliff edge comes for us, Andrew. Lad McConkey, Brian Thomas, DeAndre Hopkins, Jameson Williams, before we start reaching quite a bit.
So I guess we don't want to take Kyler then, because he's probably not going to be there when we pick again, because the Marvin Harrison Jr. guy's probably going to take him. So I just wanted to bring that up as well.
I think you're right. That's a good point. I was kind of hyper focused on the wide receivers there, but we are right about ADP on Kyler.
So,
Happy to do that, and then
yeah.
we can just make
let's take
up for the
Kyler.
volume a little.
Yeah. See, that's why we talk it through, because you were like, hey, when Kyler comes on the board, we got to remember where Marvin Harrison is, and boom, bang, bang, Kyler Murray. There we go.
Love it. And if you love catching live sports as much as I do, you're going to want to hear this. It's still baseball season, and Game Time is an authorized ticket marketplace in Major League Baseball, making it super easy to score tickets last minute. Prices actually drop closer to the first pitch, so you can grab killer deals with all-in pricing and seat views right from your phone. I've had a blast using Game Time to check out upcoming games and other high-profile events. The app, it just makes it simple to find great deals, see exactly what your view will be before you buy. My favorite deals are the last-minute deals and the zone deals. Game Time's last-minute deals can help you save up to 60% on last-minute tickets for sports, concerts, comedy, or even theatre. With zone deals, you can save even more when you choose a section and let Game Time choose your seats for you. No matter what kind of ticket or deal you're looking to get, Game Time simplifies the ticket buying process and saves you money in the process. Plus, they have the lowest price guarantee, so you know you're getting the best deal. If they're wrong, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code FantasyPros for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code FantasyPros for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Since we took Kyler Murray, James Conner, Curtis Samuel went off the board. Curtis Samuel really rising with positive news coming out of camp, it seems. Almost every day, he's being used in the backfield. He's being used out wide. He's being used inside. Definitely a player on the rise. That team stacked Josh Allen with Keon Coleman and Curtis Samuel. Then David Montgomery, Brian Thomas, CJ Stroud, who fell to pick 80. Lad McConkey, DeAndre Swift, Ramondre Stevenson. Andrew, how high are you on Curtis Samuel?
I think that he's my Bills wide receiver 1. I think in my redraft rankings, I think that's the way it should be, especially when you're looking at what he can do early on in the season. Keon Coleman looks like he can carve out a bigger role as a red zone threat, which may end up hindering Delta Kincaid when we all kind of see this Bills offense play out. But he knows this offense. He knows Joe Brady. We've seen him successful in this offense before, and he's always a player that they could do things uniquely with. They could give him rushing attempts. They could use him in the slot. They could use him outside. So I'm just confident in his role probably the most, where Keon Coleman, is he a part-time player? We talked about that last show. He's pushing for 50% snap share. That's great. I love that to get my receivers that I have to draft in round 6 to play 50% of the snaps. That's That's great. But Samuel, to me, I think that, and he's also shown historically every NFL season, he has months of production where he's, oh, did you guys know that Curtis Samuel leads the team in targets since week blank? Like, that's Curtis Samuel's shtick. That's what he does every single year. So I think that he's a really strong pick. Again, is he going to be someone we're drafting in the third round next year for the Bills receivers? No. Could Keon Coleman be that guy? Yeah, that's totally possible. The upside plays with Coleman as a rookie, but banking in the production in a cumulative scoring format like the drafters $1 million contest is, Curtis Samuel's a really strong pick.
Yeah, I love it. I just find Curtis Samuel the kind of player who's fun to bet on as well. Like, he's somebody that when he pops up, he can have an impact in a really nice way, really reliable. Coaches do seem to really like him as well. So I'm heavily overweight Curtis Samuel. I've been ahead of him, ahead of rankings on him all off season, and I'll probably try to stay there as long as I can. Pick 77 overall might be such aggressive, but I love it. DeAndre Hopkins is falling. We're down to pick 91 already, and he's still on the board. His ADP over here on Drafters is 83. I would expect that he kind of gets closer to the 100th pick. We're one pick away with our one quarterback, two running backs, three wide receivers. At wide receiver, your guy, Josh Palmer's sitting there. Jordan Addison, who feels like he could fall further. DeAndre Hopkins. Running back is Raheem Mostert, Jonathan Brooks, Tony Pollard. Tight end, David Njoku, Dallas Goedert.
I like Palmer. We need a receiver. I think that's the guy I want because whether we get Justin Herbert, whether we get Easton Stick, but Josh Palmer, he was pretty good with Easton Stick last year too. So I think Josh Palmer continues to be someone. Look, if this the thing with McConkey that we can't forget is this guy was banged up a lot at Georgia. That was the reason why his counting stats weren't nearly as good as his yards per route run or his target share. So look, he's already a little banged up at training camp. Maybe that's nothing, but look, Josh Palmer, man, he's steady, and I think that's super useful in this format. So I'm glad we went with Palmer.
Yeah, I like Palmer. I think he's somebody that is never really going to get appreciated to a huge amount. And as much as I like Lad McConkey, think he's an excellent player in many regards, it's kind of difficult to just disassociate the fact that Josh Palmer has a relationship with Justin Herbert already. He's played with him. He's pretty much the only wide receiver there who's done so. And as much as I have question marks about this whole offense, when you get to round 8 and you're playing catch up at wide receiver after going 4 straight rounds without a wide receiver, Josh Palmer could be a guy who sees plenty of volume, so I'm good with that. We got one pick before us. DeAndre Hopkins still sitting there. I don't think we need another quarterback just yet, but running back is Mostert, Brooks, Pollard, Brian Robinson, Chase Brown. Chase Brown with Jamar Chase?
Ooh, I mean, music to my ears. from your words to mine. Let's go.
Either that or we're looking at Romeo Dubs, Rashid Shaheed, or tight end David Njoku, Dallas Goedert, but I don't think tight end.
It would either be Dobbs or Chase Brown for me. I'm starting to like warm an idea behind Dobbs. Just like I think the Packers receivers are just really good in best ball because they're all going to be used. So if you want to push Dobbs, I'm cool. I've been more welcome to the idea of Dobbs if we don't want to go Chase Brown.
So I'll hit the button on Dobbs, and it's not reactionary purely to the family night snap shares counts that had him play more and getting a ridiculous amount of touchdowns on, I think it was like 8 throws and 6 touchdowns or something that he scored on Friday night. It's more about the fact that I think he has a very nice role. And in terms of this format, we've given ourselves our wide receiver 4, Josh Palmer, and wide receiver 5, Romeo Dubs. 2 guys who are going to be steady players. They might not always boom and have the highest ceiling, but we've got Jamar Chase, we've got Jalen Waddle, we've got Devonta Smith, who all have different bye weeks, and then the guy who can fall into our flex position can potentially be one of Josh Palmer or Romeo Dubs. And I think that those are both valuable players, particularly in PPR formats. They're both going to run a ton of routes. They're both going to get a decent amount of targets. And they're both quite QB-friendly players. So, yeah, that was why I leant that way just slightly. I did want to take Chase Brown. I think, he's a lot of fun. The team after us did. They stacked Zach Moss and Chase Brown together with the old handcuff strategy, taking their RB2 and 3 from the Bengals backfield, which I'm not against. I think I'm more open to it these days than I was. And it's not something I like to do in redraft, but in best ball where we tend to have these deeper rosters, I don't hate it. Andrew, how do you kind of view handcuffing these days?
Yeah, I really feel like it's so situation dependent and it's not black and white. You could draft handcuff running backs or you don't draft handcuff running backs. I think that we talked about this on our Hero RB show and our Zero RB show we did earlier last week, where there were certain circumstances where I felt, hey, if I'm going to invest this amount of capital, I want to make sure I feel strongly about the backup in the handcuff. But there's also a lot of situations where we don't really even know half the time who the backup is. You asked me a month ago, oh yeah, Elijah Mitchell, that's the guy. That's why we drafted on our FFPC team. And now, oh no, is Jordan Mason going to take the RB2 job? So you don't feel as good about that. But at the same time, we also had Tyler Algier on that team. And now it's like, oh, he could be a handcuff plus. So when you look at these things like over time, yes, sometimes it pays off, sometimes it doesn't. I think in this particular drafters, what they did by doing Moss and Chase Brown, that it's still an ambiguous backfield. Like we still don't know what the roles are. I think that where you can get away from doing it is, okay, this guy has no value, but this other guy gets hurt and then this guy has value. Like that's a clear handcuff situation, which I don't think we have that many clean handcuff situations in the NFL. Maybe as we did 10 years ago, where it was so clear, okay, this is the bell cow and this is the guy that's going to be the guy if the bell cow gets hurt. So we have so many ambiguous backfields now that I think it's okay to take shots on two Bengals players, two Titans running backs, two Browns running backs, two Chargers running backs. So because if you like the offensive environment, okay, like, and you can also hit it out of the park where first half of the season it's one guy that's really productive, and the second half of the season the other guy is really productive, whether because of an injury or he takes over. So I think as long as you like the offense, I would be like, for example, I'm not going to handcuff Devin Singletary with the Giants. So like, there is going to be one guy that's going to be good, and if I draft that guy, that's who I'm going with. So that's kind of how I would approach handcuffs. I think it is very based on situation.
Yeah, so we are back on the clock. QBs have slid a little bit in this one. I know one of your running back favorites, Blake Corum, is sat there. Trey Benson, Austin Eckler ahead of him. I'd be fine with Blake Corum here. I think this is the kind of range where I want to make sure I've got a rookie. Are you happy with Blake Corum or anyone at wide receiver? Tyler Lockett, Dontavian Wicks, Josh Downs with 5 seconds.
I would do Corum.
Let's do Corum. As we come back around the corner, we've got a chance that we could potentially take our second quarterback, depending on what this team at the 2 spot's done. They've got Tyreek Hill. They took second overall. They've already got Anthony Richardson and Brock Purdy, which is why I was kind of okay with pushing it around. I didn't expect them to take Brock Purdy, but I thought that because they had Anthony Richardson, they might not take Tua. If Tua comes back to us, do you want to lock him in as our second quarterback?
Yes, as long as he doesn't have the same bye week as Murray, right? We're good there.
Yes.
Yeah, Murray's
Yeah,
11.
so he's on week 6 and Murray's on week 11. It's definitely a format where you've really got to pay attention to those bye weeks and particularly this year because there's so many brutal bye weeks like week 14. If you've stacked up too many teams from them, your ceiling is going to be so much lower. And if you're giving up 30 points to teams around you, you're going to plummet in terms of the prizes. So Tua for our QB2.
Let's do it.
In terms of the prizes, the total prize pool that's there, we mentioned at the top, $500,000 up top to first place, second place 200,000, third place 100,000, fourth place 75,000. By the time you get down to 10th, you're talking 25 grand. Finish inside the top 100 for $1,000 guaranteed. All the way down to 28,000th, where you'll pick up $30, twice the stake that it cost you to enter. You can, of course, enter up to 150 times into it. It's definitely a fun platform. So far, through 11 rounds, we have Jamar Chase, Jalen Waddle, Devonta Smith, Trey McBride, Josh Jacobs, Kenneth Walker, Kyler Murray, Josh Palmer, Romeo Doubs, Blake Corum, and Tua. Andrew, what are you saying?
I think that we need some more running back juice because with
Yep.
Corum, again, he may be
It's
more
a
of
contingent play, but
yeah, it's a contingent play. And I mean, Walker is obviously in Jacobs. I think especially early on, I think that those guys will be really productive. I want to make sure that we are covered at least in the second half because I feel really good about our receivers. Like I feel strong about the guys we have, and we do have some interesting names coming up for running back. So I think that just looking at the board here, seeing Vidal, how high he's ranked, well, we could just leap his ADP and just draft J.K. Dobbins because that's who should, in my opinion, he should be going ahead of Vidal in every single draft. I think that some ADPs have already adjusted to that. So if in this one of our next picks, if Dobbins is on the board, I think that's one of the guys we should target.
Andrew, you were kind of one of the people to turn around on J.K. Dobbins quite early. I've tried to be balanced. Like for anyone not watching the video who's listening to this, you can see the two Ravens jerseys behind me. Like I've drafted a lot of J.K. Dobbins over the years. I've gotten hurt. I've learned the hard way. But I mean, he seems healthy. We know that players are recovering from Achilles injuries quicker. Yes, if you look at the pictures, his left leg is a lot slimmer than his right leg. He hasn't recovered that muscle mass yet. But the opportunity is absolutely there. And everyone keeps saying, okay, it was only 50K guaranteed that they paid him. I don't think it really matters at this point. What matters is he's taking the reps and he seems to be getting all the work. And Kamani Vidal is 6th-round rookie.
Yeah,
Yes, we see some of them hit, but I mean, we see a lot of them never even really take a snap in the NFL.
I mean, if it wasn't a gut punch to any Vidal truther when one of the beat reporters reported his name incorrectly spelled when he dealt with an injury at one of the practices. Look, we still don't know exactly how his Chargers backfield's going to shake out, but the thing with me with that I came around on Dobbins was I was just looking at his profile, I was looking at the backfield, looking at Gus Edwards, who checks off every single box as a dead zone running back. And I just looked at Dobbins and man, if this guy is actually healthy, then it's no contest who should be the RB1 in this backfield. And we've seen circumstances and situations before where running backs have come in on basically no money contracts. It happened to Leonard Fournette after he was cut from his team, landed on the Bucks. It was Ronald Jones' season. So for me, I think Dobbins he's one of my favorite sleepers all this season.
I'm gonna push on you here because I'd like to take Tyler Algier first. I
All right.
know,
Let's
like,
let's roll with it.
like for me, I think, and it's mainly because J.K. Dobbins. Yes, he's starting to rise a little bit, but you still see him fall so much in drafts because there's so many people who are really opinionated on J.K. Dobbins. I think obviously it could backfire on us here, but I've been in drafts where I've seen J.K. Dobbins fall 30, 40 picks behind
Mhm.
ADP, and there's still people who just don't want to take him. Whereas I like taking J.K. Dobbins, particularly if you've got a build here, but now we've got 4 running backs, so it doesn't feel like we need quite as much from him as possible. And Tyler Algier, I think, is probably one of the best running backs, one of the very best backup running backs within the NFL. So to get him, it just makes me feel slightly more comfortable with taking the upside shot on J.K. Dobbins. J.K. Dobbins makes it back to us. Auto click that one.
And
Played the room.
yes, Tom, bravo to you, sir. Bravo to you, sir. You saw the future. You saw Leggett, Mitchell, and Adam Thielen going right before J.K. Dobbins. Somebody drafted Thielen before J.K. Dobbins. Look, I don't know how it's going to play out through the entire season, but I'm telling you, week 1, I'm going to take J.K. Dobbins. So I'm happy about that.
That's it. And I mean, all it takes is doing a couple of hundred best ball drafts this season to get a good feel for the rooms and when to push it. But when you are on the turns, that's the kind of stuff that you need to be willing to do to get a little bit more value out of it. I mean, we slightly reached on Tyler Algier, slightly reached on J.K. Dobbins. So it's like, if we're going to make a little bit of a reach, I'd rather just lock in the one with the lower ADP first and just play that balancing game. In terms of the room, it feels like we're starting to hit that spot in the end of the 13th round where people are going to start making sure their quarterback position and their tight end position are secure. We've got Tua and Kyler Murray. Do you think we're going to want a third quarterback later?
I think so. I just like, especially when it's cumulative scoring, I just like having that third quarterback, and especially when you get the opportunity with some of these players that are going really, really late. Now, it's interesting. The Justin Fields dynamic is even more polarizing in this format, where there's a format where you'd want to take Russ. It would be in the cumulative scoring because we're assuming he's going to play more games, but And Fields doesn't really give you that same type of edge. Oh, well, if he doesn't play the entire season, just plays the playoff weeks, well, I'm saved because that's what I need Fields for. But you don't have that here. So he becomes even more polarizing of a player. And I think you just see other quarterbacks where we're just not sure, well, how many games are they going to play? Well, if you end up hitting on the right side of that, well, I think you can get some really good quarterback value. So I think that we should at least be open if the player is right with a certain stack or something along those lines, then we should consider a QB3.
Yeah, so one quarterback who is falling is Justin Herbert, who we
Yeah.
obviously would be stacking with Palmer. He does have the same bye week as Kyler Murray. We're a few picks away. But how are you feeling about Justin Herbert after the news that he's going to be in a walking boot for the next couple of weeks because of a foot injury? I think it was plantar fasciitis.
You got it. The people know what you're talking about.
I'm not even
It's a
close.
foot
But
injury.
yeah,
It's a foot
it's a foot
injury.
injury. But
Uh,
it's not one which requires surgery, but it's one which feels like it could possibly linger a little bit. Like, how worried are you?
I am worried enough where I'm not going to draft him in redraft formats. I think that
Yeah,
he was already kind of in that late round quarterback territory where this is going to be weird to say, but you're going to have redraft teams in shallower leagues, 14, 15 team leagues or rosters where Justin Herbert doesn't even get drafted. And that's
yeah.
so bizarre, but that's just the reality of his situation in a new offense with this now injury concern layered on. I think that given the quarterbacks that we do have on our roster already, I feel like we can risk it a little bit more with a quarterback like Herbert, especially because we're going to get him out of value because he's going to fall. And he also makes sense with we have two Chargers on our team already. So if those guys hit in any way, it's probably because Herbert wasn't injured the entire season or did play above average. So I'm cool with pushing it at least until round 15 for Herbert. Assuming yeah, he's still on the board. So, oh wait, no, he's
Uh,
gone. No, he's gone. Just kidding.
yeah, yeah. Herbert did go just about the time we started talking about him. We are one pick away, and in terms of quarterbacks, Aaron Rodgers, Will Levis, Geno Smith, Daniel Jones, guys that we can wait on. Maybe set something up different. There is Jermaine Burton, Demario Douglas, Demarcus Robinson, Quentin Johnston, Ricky Pearsall, Marvin Mims. Any of those wide receivers stand out. At tight end, it's Noah Fant. Maybe we could go Noah Fant and look at Geno Smith on the way back
Yes.
around.
Yeah, I do like that. Yeah, I like that.
In terms of bye weeks, that's okay. We've got week 11 for Trey McBride. Geno Smith's ADP is right around our next pick at 171. Aaron Rodgers and Will Levis ahead of him. The two teams on the turn. One of them only has one quarterback in Patrick Mahomes. The other team does have Anthony Richardson and Brock Purdy. So it's possible that one of these teams decides to take Geno, but with the news that Geno missed a few days of training camp, we touched on it briefly at the top that
I'd
Geno
imagine
was
he'd
back
probably
out there.
I'd imagine, he came back to practice, so he should be
Yeah.
fine. Look, we got this
Well,
last year too with they said Walker was gonna miss this was Pete Carroll, so it was a little bit different, but they made it sound like Ken Walker was gonna miss half the season. And then he is like practicing the next day. It's like, wait, okay.
well, I got a little nervous there when I spotted that Team One had Jackson Smith and Jigba, but instead they passed up to take Aaron Rodgers instead, unstacked. Which, look, I mean, stacking matters slightly less in this format. We're not looking for the same kind of correlations that you would in a tournament setting where you really need that kind of DFS mindset for those tournament weeks. But correlation is always going to be something I would lean towards because it allows you to bet on fewer things. You're getting fewer things right. You're looking to say, I believe this player is going to have a good season already. It makes sense that their quarterback would. Geno Smith makes it back to us to stack with Noah Fant, gives our third stack, our third quarterback. Happy with that, Andrew?
I love it. I love it. A stat that I got from Joe Pisapia's Fantasy Black Book was 84 quarterbacks took a snap last year. A significant snap on offense. So as great as everything always looks on paper, again, these teams aren't going to get healthier. They're going to get more injured, and part of this game is survive. I just had enough guys that played enough snaps to get enough points for me to win in the end. So I think that does matter, and the the opportunity cost, I think, especially in this situation where you're taking your quarterback 3, Geno Smith versus a bunch of rookie wide receivers, backup running backs. Geno Smith is going to start the entire season for the Seahawks unless he gets hurt. And he's probably going to play pretty well based on the offensive weapons he has to work with. So I just like taking bets on that type of quarterback in this situation when I really don't think the opportunity cost is is so expensive.
Yep. So as we round out round 15, we have Jamar Chase, Jalen Waddle, Devonta Smith, Trey McBride, Josh Jacobs, Kenneth Walker, Kyler Murray, Josh Palmer, Romeo Dubs, Blake Corum, Tua, Tyler Algier, J.K. Dobbins, Noah Fant, and Geno Smith. Sitting here with Tua stacked with Jalen Waddle, Kyler Murray stacked with Trey McBride, and Geno stacked with Noah Fant. All three quarterbacks on different bye weeks. The running back room feels fairly sturdy. Well, maybe a little delicate when you've got J.K. Dobbins in there, but we've got Josh Jacobs, we've got Kenneth Walker, we've got Blake Corum, Tyler Algier, and J.K. Dobbins. Like, that's a fun mix. It's a different mix of players, so there's definitely lots of different upsides there. How do you feel about the running back room? Do you feel like we need two more, one more? Where are you sitting on that?
I think at least one more guy. I find that when I come to this point in the drafts, I feel I don't want to be pushing towards running back or wide receiver in any which way necessarily. And maybe that's wrong, but I guess I'm looking more at player archetypes at this point where who do I actually like on the board that's still available, whether it's a running back or wide receiver, which I think that we're obviously highlighting. Those are our two main quote unquote needs. So again, seeing would I rather draft Aldrich Estime or would I rather draft Troy Franklin? Just like looking at the top of the board. Right now, I'd rather have Estime as Denver Broncos running back. That's who I would rather invest in instead of a Troy Franklin, who I don't know where he stands on the depth chart, especially early on. That Denver Broncos, it's weird because we opened up when he first drafted. All right, we're on the clock, so my
Do you want to go?
allegory we'll pick up soon later.
I'd be happy to go Audric Estime, and then we
Okay,
can possibly ease back from the running back position and just start hammering wide receivers. Maybe grab another tight end.
yeah, I like Estime. I liked him a lot out of Notre Dame. It's so weird because when Estime first went to Denver, I thought it was a horrible landing spot, and everything since that time has not I've felt totally different about it. About just how they've talked him up, how it seems like this could be Javante's last year, and how I mean a lot of the analysis that's been thrown out there is how great Sean Payton offenses are for Broncos running backs or just running backs in general, especially in the passing game. So again, Estime's path is nowhere clear how he's going to get touches, but it seems like hey, if he gets on the field, this guy should be pretty productive, especially when you just look at what he did at the college level.
Yeah, I mean, Broncos just checked down to running backs at an absurd rate. Bo Nix, we know, is going to be a check down master. And we're one pick away. Devontae Walker, who returned to training for the Ravens today. Malachi Corley, DJ Chark, who could be out there a lot for the Chargers. Luke McCaffrey, Roman Wilson, Javon Baker, Andre Yoshevich, but maybe he'd come back to us. What are you saying, Andrew? I don't have massive strong feel here. Maybe Devontae Walker's fun.
I love Javon Baker. I love that guy. It's my Patriots homerism, but he's one of my favorite receivers in this class.
So give me the 1 minute pitch on Javon Baker. We're locked in an elevator. Go.
Okay, so Javon Baker, in terms of I think it was either yards per reception, it was an advanced statistic in terms of wide receivers at the college level. But basically, when you look at him in that number versus Brian Thomas, Malik Neighbors, Marvin Harrison, he was the only other guy in there that wasn't drafted in round one. So I think that he again scouted at Alabama, learned under Devontae Smith. We already have Devontae Smith on this roster. So we already have a narrative building within our roster itself. The Patriots are going to host the Eagles August 13th at joint practices. Javon Baker is going to be falling around Devontae Smith, just like he did at Alabama, because that's who he looks like when he plays. When you watch him play, he to me reminds me so much of Devontae Smith. And I just think that from an upside perspective, if there's anyone in this Patriots offense that could actually ascend to, hey, this is a clear alpha, not, oh, this guy just like leads the team in targets and is not really an alpha, but just has the most targets, kind of like a Douglas or Polk, which is kind of how I view those players. It would be Baker that would really take over this offense and really be that true number one threat for either Jacoby Brissett or a Drake May. So that's why I think Baker has the most upside, and upside's the name of the game. So that's why I like Baker.
Yeah, you get down this range of a draft, and there's always a level of projection involved with these rookies. Are they going to be able to take it to the next level? But like you look back at Javon Baker's college career, and he showed growth in like the amount of receiving yardage and the involvement that he had every year. His yards per reception jumped pretty much every single year. His A dot grew every year. So there was always things where you're like, if he just keeps ascending, then there's the potential for a really nice NFL receiver here. And much as I've started to cool on the Patriots offense compared to where I was a month ago, taking shots on rookie wide receivers is always a fun idea. We know they're going to grow into a bigger role as the season goes on. And with a wide receiver room of Jamar Chase, Jalen Waddle, Devonta Smith, Josh Palmer, Romeo Dubs, and Javon Baker, those two guys who I mentioned earlier, Josh Palmer and Romeo Dubs, they've given you enough wiggle room that if Baker doesn't hit early on, it's okay. We've got guys who can be out there who can be reasonable level of reception guys, hopefully, so that we can give Baker that time. And then if he hits down the stretch run, which is when we need to start separating ourselves from the other teams around us in this format, then that's great, because so many of the teams that do hit in this format, the top 100 teams are going to look very similar. You go back and look last year, there'll be a lot of Kyron teams, there'll be a lot of CMC teams, a lot of Puka Nakua teams, and it's always going to look very similar. But those fine edges that you can find from drafting the guys in the last 5 rounds really matter on a platform like this. Round 18 coming up, and we do have 3 quarterbacks, 6 running backs, then we've got 6 wide receivers and 2 tight ends. 3-6-8-3's a roster construction I end up falling into a lot this year. At tight end, there's Colby Parkinson, Jelani Wood, Greg Dulcich, Dawson Knox, Theo Johnson. There's a couple of names that we could look to get to in the next round, perhaps. But here at wide receiver, Devontae Walker, Luke McCaffrey, Roman Wilson, Darius Slayton, Jalen Hyatt, who according to reports today is ahead of Darius Slayton. What do you like, Andrew?
I like the tight end. I know we were talking about Dulcich earlier on. We have another Denver Bronco on our team already with Estime. So, look, is he going to be healthy all year long? I have no idea. But what do we know about tight ends? They get hurt a lot. They do. So I like Dulcich as the third tight end play in this build.
Yeah, let's love that. And I like Dulcich. I think, that's who I brought up at the top of the show for good reason. I'm hoping he can turn it around. And as a tight end 3 behind Fant and McBride, I'd like to believe we're relying on him slightly less. I was going to try pushing that one around the corner, but the team out of a 1 spot only has 2 tight ends, Dalton Schultz and Pat Fryermuth. If I was them, I'd be looking for another tight end here, because after the round 18 and 19 picks, they won't pick till the very last pick of the draft. At wide receiver, look, if Devontae Walker makes it back to us, my homerism's going to have to shine through as a Baltimore Ravens fan. And again, similar to the Javon Baker thing, drafting rookies here is fun, but also Devontae Walker could be an incredibly boom or bust type player. We know that Ravens saw him as, there he goes off the board. We see him as a big deep play threat, and I don't mind taking shots on players with that profile. So, with no Devontae Walker, Luke McCaffrey, Roman Wilson, Darius Slayton, Zay Jones, Jalen Hyatt, A.T. Perry, Marquez Valdes-Scantling, or Khalif Raymond. Andrew, does anyone stand out to you after I got my heart ripped out?
No, I'm so sorry about that. No one really stands out to me. Are there any running backs that are interesting? Or is it just mostly we're looking at receivers?
Dylan Laub, Alexander Mattison. Laub, I don't mind. We could take him.
We could always
Otherwise,
hedge on AJ Dillon in the best shape of his life.
no.
That's fair.
I'm gonna take Jalen Hyatt just because that one hit me so hard that I couldn't do it. So yeah, Jalen Hyatt. Like, I know when he came out, there was plenty of concerns about him coming from quite a, it wasn't a very advanced system out of Tennessee. A lot of people thought that maybe it wouldn't translate to the NFL, but it seems like there's enough positive buzz around the Giants in terms of the step that Hyatt's taken that I think I want to take shots on him. Yes, it's all going to be Malik Neighbors. Yes, Daniel Jones might continue to be not a very good quarterback, but second-year players, they're good players to take a bet on at this range of the draft. Have you been drafting any Jalen Hyatt, or am I just out on an island on this one?
I have not been drafting a lot of Jalen Hyatt. I guess the thing for me is they have so many guys that are best fit from the slot, and they can't all play in the slot. They need to have somebody play on the outside. And I do remember reading that same thing where they're trying to get Darius Slayton out of the building. They have joint practices with the Lions, and they're hoping that they can impress. Darius Slayton can look good enough during those practices that the Lions just want to trade for him to be their wide receiver 3 instead of insert Darius Fountain, Jonathan Peoples-Jones, that big bodied X receiver, whoever that player is. So, um, I get the upside a case with Hyatt, especially when it comes to, a year 2 player, pretty talented player coming out of as a 3rd round pick. But my concern is I think this offense may just be neighbors, and that's all that didn't really work for it just because of the quarterback play. So that would be my only concern. I like when we're looking at receivers, you just scrolled over Whittington. If this Puka
Well,
thing becomes a thing, like I don't mind taking a shot on him.
so what I was doing there, I'm just gonna chuck a bunch of names into the queue, and I feel like this is a format where scrolling down and finding somebody who's not getting drafted every time might actually be an advantage. So we got a few picks out. So I'm going to pitch you a few different players here and see if you like any of them outside of Whittington, who's there. And if you don't like any of my suggestions, I'm absolutely fine with Whittington. Dylan Laub, Cam Akers, Trey Sermon, Jordan Mason, Johnny Wilson, Brendan Rice, and Whittington. How do you feel about any of these? Do you see any of these potentially having a big role in 2024 or
Well,
potentially just enough of a role at the back end that it really helps us separate?
Well, I think so. Lab would have been one guy, but he got taken. No on Cam Akers. I cannot be hurt again. I'm sorry. And this is probably why people can't draft Dobbins. That's why I can't draft Cam Akers. That's just why I can't
Yep.
do it. So I get it. I get it, Dobbins people, but I was never one of them. So that's why I'll draft as much Dobbins as I want. Now, Sermon seems like he's so underrated, and it doesn't make a lot of sense because he's the clear cut number 2 in an offense. Shane Steichen and would smash. So I like Trey Sermon. Johnny Wilson had a really good prospect profile, really strong, and it seems like he has the upper hand as that wide receiver 3. Paris Campbell's already hurt. Water is wet. There we go. So either Wilson or Whittington for me. I guess the Whittington thing, I think that his ADP is just going to rise, and he's always going to be drafted because of this Puka Nakua thing. And if that, so I feel like we're getting some solid CLV with Whittington. So
Let's go, Whittington. I like that. I think that's fun. That is 20 rounds done and dusted. Our draft out of the 103 spot finished with a 3.683. We did have Kyler Murray, Tua, and Geno Smith at quarterback. All those buys on separate weeks, which is very nice. We got pretty much all 3 of them around ADP. You can see our picks line up almost identical to their ADP. At running back, we got Josh Jacobs, Kenneth Walker, Blake Corum, Tyler Algier, J.K. Dobbins, and Audric Estime. We got a bit of a value on Audric Estime, 15 spots past ADP, otherwise kind of normal. Then we had Jamar Chase, Jalen Waddle, Devonta Smith, Josh Palmer, Romeo Dubs, Javon Baker, Jalen Hyatt, and Whittington there right at the end. Again, that just feels like the kind of wide receiver room which has it's got so much upside in those first 3 wide receivers. That middle 2, it's kind of our security blanket, the guys who are going to help us in this full PPR format because they're going to be out there so consistently and they've got those existing relationships with their quarterbacks. And then the last 3 wide receivers, Javon Baker, Jalen Hyatt, and then Whittington, it's just all shoot for the moon upside players that really we hope we can get something out of. Trey McBride, Noah Fant, and Greg Dulcich at the tight end position. Again, being mindful of the bye weeks, so it kind of worked out nicely with them being on 11, 10, and 14. Andrew, what are you saying? Can we win $500,000 with this team?
I think so. I think that we brought up this point a couple different times, but I think that this is super key when you're looking at the Josh Palmers, Romeo Dobbs, and how those guys are undervalued, I think, in this format, even though they're really the perfect guys to target when you're looking for those safety nets during bye weeks. Hey, I don't want to take a 0. We're probably going to get a bunch of zeros from Baker and Whittington and Hyatt at certain points during the year, whether they're not playing, whether their offenses are underwhelming. That's just the case when you're taking some of these guys later on. But Palmer and Dobbs are 2 starting wide receivers that are going to potentially lead their team in routes run, and they're attached to above average quarterbacks when healthy. And we got them near pick 100. And I just think that is super valuable. And to me, they also have, I think, a little bit of there is some upside there with them too because they're young. They're young players. So I guess whenever I'm ranking players like them, they always end up next to like the Cortland Suttons of the world, Tyler Lockett, guys that I know are also going to play a lot of snaps, but are probably on the decline because they're veteran players. Whereas these guys, well, they're still younger. Relatively speaking, Josh Palmer, it seems like he's been in the NFL for 10 years. He's not even 25 years old yet. So there's untapped potential with him too, alongside the floor that he is coming to the table with the amount of routes he's going to run in this offense. So I think that's, again, any big takeaways when you're looking at receivers here. Hey, it's not always about who can just win me a week. That's not necessarily what you're shooting for in every single receiver you draft in this format. So guys like Dobbs and a Josh Palmer, where I like them usually in a vacuum, like Dobbs, I think this is the first time I've drafted Dobbs. And I think this is the perfect format to get him in.
Yeah, absolutely. The one kind of early concern for me was perhaps that we drafted 2 running backs on the week 10 buys. But then what we did is we didn't draft a single other running back with a week 10 buy. We got a nice profile group from all of them. And then at wide receiver, we've only got one wide receiver with a week 10 buy, which means that we know there's a very strong chance that we're not relying on a running back to hit our flex in week 10. We should absolutely be able to fill the flex from somebody out of the wide receiver room, which when we have Jamar Chase, Jalen Waddle, Devonta Smith all playing in week 10, it really means that we're only counting on one other player to fill that flex and hopefully give us a nice score that means we're not taking any kind of dips at any point there. It's a really fun team. I feel very pleased with it. I think that it's definitely got legs. I think it ticks all the kind of boxes that we want to be doing when we're looking at this platform. I know I plan on drafting a bunch of teams over here on Drafters over the next month before the season starts. We will be back next week talking risers and fallers in ADP, getting you caught up on all the training camp news and all the news from preseason.
Preseason week 1. Let's go. Oh my God, I can't wait for all the snaps, the starters. This guy had a cup of coffee with the starting quarterback. We got to know this. Oh, it's go time, Tom.
These are the things that matter. And remember, if you're going to sign up to Drafters, use the code FantasyPros for a 100% deposit match up to $100. Use the link in the description to redeem this offer. It's a fantastic platform for drafting in. A lot of fun. Me and Andrew will be back next week. Until then, we will see you in the best ball streets.